Rub-a-lub-lub, the cub gets the dub, so be careful who you make fun of in high school, because dorks these days are looking pretty damn cool. Riddle me this. Is it because of the roids they're taking? Or is it the rhythm of nature in the making? We're going over to Rictus, so tell us, man, what's the weather like in Standard Land?
Forecast this week is one pissed off honey badger coming out with claws sharpened and an eye-added Lanta. Will dragons burn up these cubs before they stomp through downtown ATL? Can Izzet return to glory after a week of all the grinders being shadow banned from playing it? Can Landfall land the knockout blow in the Deep South this weekend? Comment below on this week's Welcome to 2026, Rebels. We are already on to Week 7 of Avatar Standard with Spotlight Atlanta and local RCQs as the only stops left on this train before it arrives at Lorwyn with the next set of puzzle pieces to sort. This week, we looked at 16 major tournament results spanning the globe, and Temur Ramp came out on top with a whopping 18% meta share and 4 trophies for its effort. If you're seeing it listed elsewhere as Simic Ramp, don't worry too much about the terminology. Both lists are close enough that they'll be added together here.
Second place goes to green-based Landfall decks with a massive uptick to 18% of the meta and 2 trophies as well. Again, folks, we realize that there are a few variants of these Landfall lists, but we're combining them here as they function similarly and the core engine isn't shifting from list to list.
Third place went to Jeskai Control with a 9% meta share and 3 trophies. Jeskai has quietly increased its meta share each week of Avatar Standard, and as we approach the end of the season, Control is primed to shine, having identified its top opponents to pick apart with card advantage and positioning. Jeskai remains a dark horse for Atlanta on that basis alone. Never underestimate a strong Control pilot in the final weeks of an established metagame.
Kicking off our challenger tier is Temur Lessons with a 9% meta share and a single trophy. Speculation for Atlanta suggests that there's another hot build of this archetype to be unveiled tomorrow, but until then, it's taken a bit of a fall this week.
Fifth place goes to Dimir Tempo with a 10% meta share but 0 trophies once more. Dimir continues to be in a weird spot, and we're all waiting to see if the curious Kaido engine can find glory down south this weekend.
Rounding out our challenger tier is Mono Red Aggro, boasting only a 4% meta share, but 2 trophies nonetheless. Will Red be fast enough against all these ramp lists, or is it strictly to punish the Izzet faithful? Comment below with your thoughts, and let's get into our archetype breakdowns, starting with Temur Ramp.
I only came in as I thought we were playing Magic the Gathering tonight. I am hoping we still may.
Morris won a 78-player MTGO challenge last Friday with Temur Ramp, emphasizing an explosion of growth around this archetype in the last week. Rictus, is this the deck to beat going into Atlanta?
I mean, honestly, yeah. There are 2 builds of this archetype, and the question remains, do you want to be Simic? Do you want to be Temur? But what's clear is that 3 powerhouse mythics have combined to revamp Fires of Yavimaya as an archetype in Standard. Bonus points if you're a paper boomer like me and you know what that card is. Otherwise, feel free to look it up. Now, red splash here. You can go with Frostcliff Siege, you can go Devastating Onslaught. Both are hyper relevant at the moment. It kind of depends on how explosive you want this build to be. I love that this build in particular is going onto 4 into the Flood Maw. That's the tech right now. Like, it is bouncing lands. For those that are sitting there like, why is it Flood Maw? Why is it not something else? It's because when your opponent plays Badger Mole Cub, you get to bounce their land and time walk them. And a double time walk for a single mana is absolutely brutal in the mirror. So, given the disappearance of Reanimator from the meta, I like that we're seeing that Detect Intrusion getting shoved over to the sideboard and into the Flood Maws into the main.
Yeah, I mean, this deck is everywhere right now on MTGO, right? What sorts of cards would you be looking at as tech to fight this deck in Atlanta?
But we already talked a little bit about Into the Flood Maw, and I expect that to be the mirror tech that also gets used with all the Izzet builds between Lessons, Looting, etc. We're already seeing that shift in a number of different decks. But outside of that, sweepers. You know, those early sweepers, the Slag Storms, the Split Ups, even Day of Judgment. Sweepers are how you deal with a deck like this, because they're going to try and go wide, and they're going to try and make it so that if you try to 1-for-1 them with, you know, single target removal, you run the risk of them exploding before you can actually get off the ground. And that's a problem. But sweepers, especially things like Day of Judgment, where you just whole board, reset, let's go again, really well positioned right now as tech.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I think this deck kind of relies on Riddler and Frostcliff Siege to get around its weakness to board wipes, in a sense. And while those are certainly good into this deck, let's not drag it on too long, or we might form an opinion about this Landfall deck.
Josh Good took down a 31-player RCQ in Ohio on the back of Mono Green Landfall, cementing another title for the explosive Wombo combo of Landfall and Might Form. Athena, walk us through why you like the Mono Green build.
So remember a few weeks ago when I said I wanted to see Ice Till Explorer and S for Origins make a deck? Well, here we are. We're looking to attack the Izzet decks of the format with this deck. For those that haven't really seen it before, you're looking to punish them with your 4 toughness creatures and your ability to combo kill from kind of nowhere. Your Ice Till Explorer and Might Form Harmonizer make a really quick lethal, especially when you can make a small creature unblockable with Escape Tunnel first. And this deck is really good at punishing the lack of good instant speed removal for bigger creatures. But as we see cards like Into the Floodmaw rise up a little bit more, it could honestly make this deck a little bit worse. This deck is going for the mono green version without a splash, but there are definitely versions of this with a white splash, with a blue splash, etc. So you kind of have your options there.
So, I mean, Athena, talking about splash colors, do you have a preference if you're going to splash? And if so, why?
I think with how much Cub we're currently seeing in the format, with Cub having a good matchup into this deck, I think that you probably need to splash white. It kind of sucks to stop running your World Wagon, but there are other ways to get OTKs without it. And if you cut it, then you can sideboard Clarion Conqueror, which is honestly another really, really good tech card against these Badger Mole Cub decks.
Yeah, you're not wrong, and that's something that needs to be mentioned, especially as we look at the Brewer's Corner over there and see what's up there. Like, Clarion Conqueror is a card right now, and you're absolutely right. Like, splashing white for it, hell of a move. But with the rise of linear strategies, we also see a corresponding move from control players in the meta. So let's talk a little bit about Jeskai Control.
Universe won an 85-player MTGO challenge last Monday with Jeskai Control, taking down Simic Ramp in the semis and the finals. Rictus, is this the top control option going into Atlanta?
I think so. Like, we're in week 7. This is traditionally when control strategies are at their zenith, as the format is as solved as it's likely to get before we add new cards into the mix with Lorwyn. So this build in particular, it acknowledges that against these ramp decks, you gotta just slow them down with early removal, wrath the board a couple of times, and keep them low on mana availability so they can't really abuse those Quantum Riddler draws to outdraw you. And let's also note that they have Unagi of Kyoshi Island, and that's not just good against the Izzet Looting decks and the Izzet Lessons decks. It's also great when your opponent says, we want to be using Quantum Riddler with regularity. And you just go, okay, you get card advantage, we get card advantage. Control decks, pound for pound, the card quality is going to be higher on average, so you don't mind doing that as long as you can land an Unagi to offset the card advantage that they're going to get.
Control is really well positioned against Cub in particular, but outside of the Cub decks, the other top decks of the format tend to have positive matchups against it, right? I mean, just looking at the list, Landfall, Lessons, Dimir, these are all decks that are good into Control. So is this deck a risk in a wider metagame like Atlanta?
It can be, but at the same time, Control does a really good job when everybody is playing linear strategies, right? If you have a deck that does not have a backup plan and the control player has figured out how to isolate your plan A and dismantle it, especially post-board when they can make some adjustments to take out some of the weaker cards, replace them with things that are more relevant, then your linear game plan is almost doomed, right? But at the same time, if you have enough of a diverse field that you cannot address all the points of attack, that's when Control really struggles. And I don't know how diverse Atlanta's going to be. Like, we think it's going to be fairly diverse, but at the same time, 18% of the meta is sitting on Temur Ramp, 18% sitting on Green Landfall. That's almost 40% of the meta in just 2 decks. So will it actually be diverse, or is that just wishful thinking and here comes Cub? I don't know yet. We'll have to find out.
Well, for all you experienced control pilots out there, I wish you the best fighting the good fight. Next up, we're moving to our challenger tier, starting with Lessons.
Joseph Pio beat Gruul Leyline in the finals of a 21-player RCQ in Wisconsin this past weekend using their version of Izzet Lessons. I want to note that we've combined Izzet and Temur Lessons because fundamentally these are very close lists. Now, Athena, is this the ideal build, or do you like that Temur splash?
I feel like that green splash is pretty much just for the mirror or maybe for looting. The decks where you want to run Origin of Metal Bending against, and maybe an Iroh as your top end occasionally in some of them. Otherwise, I would much rather have the cleaner mana, especially when a lot of your later turns revolve around casting a bunch of spells for a single mana, right? You have like your single pip cards once you get your reductions, and you just want to cast as many of those as possible. So getting stuck on green lands kind of sucks there. This build is kind of back to the basics, more of what we saw back at the World Championships, right? 4 monuments, no other big win conditions in the main, and then Quantum Riddler and Rawl continue to be the sideboard win conditions of choice for when the opponent brings in Artifact Hate, Grave Hate, etc.
So I look at the sideboard, and it's a little different from what we've worked with internally with the team. Are there any shifts that you would make to it personally?
So I'm a big fan of Unagi of Kyoshi Island. I've been talking up that card pretty much since the set came out as a pseudo answer to Riddler, and I think that I would like to see another one or a third Riddler, one of the two. I feel like this deck is a little more susceptible to hate than people are willing to admit, and I think having, at least in the post-board matches, and I think having more options is better when it comes to those post-board games where you just need to fight through it.
Sure. Well, whether lessons are learned, I think Dimir is actually the real question right now for everybody, because we keep seeing it and we're not sure if it's actually going to show up at Atlanta or if this is just people that can't afford Badgermole Cubs. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Drugo made it to the finals of Friday's 77-player challenge before losing to Mono Red in the finals. Rictus, what do you think of the latest build?
I mean, you look at this build and it's maxed out on Bat, Drowner, Siren, Tidebinder, and Kaido in the main. This is a maximum disruption package, and acknowledging that is also acknowledging that this is where we have to be to compete with Temur Ramp right now. We need to have early removal, we need to have a ton of disruption. Deep Cavern Bat doesn't die against them like ever. So it basically just thought seizes on a stick and just draws you cards with Enduring Curiosity, which is huge. Tidebinder being able to lock down Riddlers, being able to lock down Ouroboros, like, it's strong right now. If you can take out their payoff card at the end, it's a big problem for them. They don't always have more than one payoff card at the end of that rainbow because they have to dedicate so much of their deck to just staying in the game and playing ramp and trying to build up mana sources. But there's only like 12 to 13 payoff cards at most typically. So if you can shut down one or two of those, oftentimes they don't have a backup plan.
So obviously this deck has a weak matchup against the Cub deck, right? The Temur Ramp deck. But it does have a positive matchup into a lot of other things. Can it punish the non-Cub decks enough to survive in this meta?
Depends on which ones we're talking about, right? Like if I'm playing Sultai Reanimator, I am terrified of Dimir Tempo. But at the same time, if like Reanimator fell off a cliff, then Tempo loses a great matchup right there. Can it, take over against other decks? I think it's well positioned against Jeskai Control. As a control player, I never want to see Curiosity and Kaido going into my field. Like, that's a nightmare to deal with most of the time. And at the same time, this next deck here with Mono Red Aggro, it can be a problem. It can get under you, and you have to position so much of your resources to containing it. So, I don't know. It can punish a number of these decks, Athena, but I've never looked at Dimir and thought, this is the solution.
No, I could see that. Dimir's sort of always been in that awkward spot where it loses to like the top 1 or 2 decks and has some favorable matchups across tier 2, but that's just never enough these days. And while it is in Dimir colors, you'll really be left black and blue from a pummeling that you can get from Mono Red Aggro.
Fives took down the 77-player challenge on Friday night, beating Dimir Aggro in the finals. Now, Athena, this player took out Landfall in the quarters, Simic Ramp in the semis, and then Dimir in the finals. Is this a realistic pick for Atlanta?
I mean, you know me, Rictus. I have never been particularly big on the current state of Red in this format, especially post-Screaming Nemesis ban, and especially if we're going to see more Jeskai Control, then this looks really, really bad into Jeskai Control. It does do really well against the green decks that don't have the necessary interaction to fight back here, and especially in particular, you're fighting against these Razorkin Needleheads that will get this damage on you every single turn, and if they land an O'Hare, you can't remove these cards. These cards will just deal all the damage to you that they want. This build is back to running Tersa Light Shatter. We've kind of seen people go back and forth on if they want this card or not, but I think this just gets a little higher on the curve to make us a little less susceptible to all the pyroclasms and the torches and the firebending lessons that are currently being run against these Cub decks.
So we've we've seen mono red, but we've also seen a splash of Boros Burn pop up recently as well. Do you like that white splash or no?
I mean, the white splash is basically free. I think the only downside of it, to be honest, is the extra damage you'll take from the shocks and from the Sunspine links if you're running that. The Boros stack, I think, actually does an even better job at fighting the top decks because you're not reliant on your creatures getting through combat with other creatures. You're reliant on your opponent not having things like counter magic, not having life gain, and these Simic decks, these Izzet decks, they don't have those. They don't really have that much life gain, and their counter spells are not going to be that effective against it if the best they've got is it'll quench ya. So I do like the Boros Burn deck. You also get to run things like Slick Shot, and Slick Shot really heavily punishes these green decks.
Yeah, there's nothing quite like getting a Slick Shot where they go Badger Mole and you go, okay, but now you're dead, because welcome to Slick Shot land. If you're not going to interact with me, I have a faster turn than you ramping. Like, I'll just deal damage while you try to start to get to the point where you deal damage. And that makes sense. And at one point we talked with Izzet Looting and Izzet Lessons, like, do you run dissection tools just for red out of the board? Because we need some kind of life gain in these colors, right? And nobody's doing that anymore. So it could be a dark horse, I'll give you that. But that'll wrap up our Challenger tier. So let's head over to the Brewer's Corner. Let's see just how spicy Sultai Ramp is. Athena, take it away.
So credit to Alan Hubbard, who won an RCQ in Texas this past weekend with this. And this is essentially your Golgari Ouroboros deck, splashing blue for a couple of really cool things here. So obviously Quantum Riddler. You have your sideboard Kaidos, your sideboard Tashanas, your sideboard Detect Intrusions. And these are cards that really help you in some of the matchups that this deck would struggle against, such as Control or Reanimator. That's really where this sort of thing shines comparatively. The interesting thing here is the Fawnsbane Troll, if I'm saying that name right. It's this really powerful card as a 4-mana 4/4 that gets like this fight effect on it. So it can actually give you some more interaction when you know, mana is free in these Cub decks, right? It doesn't matter if you spend the extra mana. So I think that you end up getting a lot more of a different game plan than these Simic decks do, because running black does give you the interaction that you need against some of these other decks.
Yeah, and I mean, some really spicy tutor targets there as well. You know, like there's only 2 Deep Cavern Bats, 2 Overlords, there's 1 Riddler, there's 1 Fawnsbane Troll, but you've got 4 Nature's Rhythm. So in many scenarios, you have 5 or 6 copies of these cards, depending on how you're doing things. And they have Lively Dirge as well. So they have like 6 tutors sitting in this deck as well. And that's not small. Lively Dirge in particular gets so much better in a Cub deck where you have all that extra mana. So you can just go, sure, whatever, 4 mana tutor, Oro, let's go. We don't care. But that in mind, let's talk about another deck that beats the ever-loving hell out of Cub. For those of you who are a little salty like me and are tired of losing to the Ramp deck, let's introduce a little something called Boros Dragons. So, credit to Ricky Lynn, top 8 at Texas RCQ this past weekend. Clarion Conqueror. We talked a little bit about this earlier as a splash card for Landfall, and here we are, it's back. It's so good, and people are like, why is Conqueror so good in this deck? Well, because you play Momo, which means Clarion Conqueror can come down on turn 2 and stop every mana dork on the battlefield from mattering immediately. That's a hell of a bargain against a deck that plays like 20 mana dorks. Being able to just go, a third of your deck doesn't work. Just try anything now. It's very efficient. It does a great job of what you're trying to do, and it punishes arguably the best deck in the format. Momo and Sarkhan here, reasonably priced ways to get that dragon side started, and you have a ton of early removal with Twin Maws, Burst Lightnings, Get Losts. To me, the biggest cope card in this list is Charming Scoundrel, and I hate it so much. I want this to be another variant of Momo and Sarkhan so badly that like helps us get the dragon plan off the ground. And instead, it's just kind of this awkward, you can ramp a little bit for 1 dragon next turn, hope it was the right one, and it paid off and they didn't kill it, because otherwise here's a 1/1 with haste. And I don't know, it feels like cope to me, Athena, but the rest of this list I think is spicy as hell.
Yeah, I mean, it's very, very good at beating up on these Cub decks, and it's still a deck that has a reasonable game plan, right? I mean, at the end of the day, if you're just playing somewhat larger creatures into the Izzet decks, you're going to have trouble killing things like Nova Hellkite, Magmatic Hellkite pretty consistently. So I don't hate the deck into some of those matchups too.
Absolutely, and I mean, especially Magmatic Hellkite is in a weird spot because turn 4 Magmatic feels slow, but turn 3 Magmatic feels reasonable. And turn 3 Magmatic against like a 3-color mana base that doesn't have enough basics feels kind of broken. So I'm with you. Like it's kind of underrated right now, and I don't know. The Dragons list is fun. It's spicy. I'm here for it.
All right, and with that, we're going to move on from our Brewer's Corner, and we're going to teach you a little bit about how to stay ahead of the curve. All right, so if you haven't looked at the graphic already, Rictus and I are both obviously coping this week because we both picked decks that aren't actually on the tier list, right? So clearly, we've gone crazy, we've lost our minds, we're just locking in the decks that we've been playing this whole time, right? No, in all seriousness, I think that Izzet Looting is still, to this day, a very good mid-range deck in this format that can adapt to whatever we're seeing. And a big upside of this is that we're not really seeing the Sultai Reanimator deck, which was this deck's kind of nightmare matchup, right? So we don't have to run the main deck soul guides. We can play different cards in those slots. So we go back to the Winter Night Stories. We go back to the 4 Tiger Seals. We go to Glacial Dragon Hunt. Glacial Dragon Hunt in particular, very good if you just need to keep removing a threat every single turn, because you get to do the same harmonized things you got to do with Winter Night Stories between your Riddler and your Tiger Seal that really enable these things. The other thing I want to point out is this Get Out card that's in the sideboard is very, very good right now. It'll counter pretty much anything you need it to out of the big cards out of Simic, out of the entire Ice Till Explorer deck, and it's just such a house because even in a pinch, you can just bounce a Storm Chasers and a Roaring Furnace, get it back to your hand, replay those again. Very flexible card and definitely better than a lot of the flash freezes and other things I've been seeing.
That's fair, and this is actually the first list I've seen where I look at Glacial Dragon Hunt and I go, yes, this is the card I want to play, because Tiger Seal is what really makes that card viable. The ability to go turn 1 Seal, turn 2 Dragon Hunt, turn 3 Harmonized Dragon Hunt, untap Seal, that seems reasonable there. I like that. But let's move on over. Sultai Reanimator, it's still cope, and I'm still winning. Let's go. Okay, so I'm just going to put this out there. I think people have been building this deck incorrectly, and that's why it has not been doing well. A lot of people are still on 4 Brood Spinner. Please stop doing that. It's good against Dimir, it's bad against everybody else, and we don't need it against Mono Red. What you do need is 3 Harvesters of Misery in the main today. You need to be able to have 7 to 8 Wrath effects, depending on if you're pre or post board, that do the work you need them to do against these ramp decks. Like, you need to kill on turn 2 their ramp creature, and you likely need to be able to hit a Wrath on 4 through Kavaro. There are some consistency issues until we get to Lorwyn and we get Formidable Speaker, and everyone knows that. What you don't know is that this build is actually tearing apart Temur right now. I'm currently sitting, I think, 6-0 on the ladder with it, and it's tight, it's not easy, it's never going to be an easy matchup, and their broken draws will beat you, but that's why we play best of 3, because they're not getting that broken draw 2 out of 3 games on average. And if it happens, take the loss, move on, tilt a little in the bathroom, it's fine. We've all been there. Oh, and the sideboard guide's on Coffee and Grinders, by the way. It's ready for Atlanta. Somebody please take this and have some fun, because I can't make it to Atlanta, and I really want to see this take it down.
Yeah, I mean, we've been on these 2 decks for a while, right? And we've play tested this with the team too, and I think both of these builds actually are a lot more well positioned than any tier lists will show them to be. So definitely watch out for these sorts of builds that people are kind of tuning up and picking different slots for and their flex slots to fight the current metagame.
Absolutely. And with that, let's move on to our key takeaways. First key takeaway, gang. Temur Ramp has shifted over to Simic Ramp predominantly. I'm not saying you can't run the Red Splash. I'm not saying it's wrong to run the Red Splash. Just know that in the metagame going into Atlanta, we are seeing a ton of people cut the red entirely and just move over to Simic.
If you're looking for a super positive matchup into the Simic deck, Jeskai Control is really good here, especially based on the trophies it took away from Ramp in the finals.
Key takeaway number 3. Sultai Reanimator fell off a cliff. It's not been seen or heard from for the most part in about a week. You'll see the occasional top 8, but you're not seeing it take down trophies. Again, we talked about this. I don't think they're building it right. I do think you need all those Harvesters in the main right now because Ramp is everywhere.
Yeah, and speaking of Ramp, Landfall hit hard for a minute, and then it just fell off a bit because Simic Ramp took over and Jeskai Control responded.
Big takeaway number 5. Dimir, Izzet Lessons. Both of them have maintained reasonable meta shares, and Izzet Lessons in particular is a deck that we're not sure if it's just being kept under wraps. There's a rumor that it was shadow banned by some of the better players, and nobody was supposed to play it in the challenges to keep it off the radar going into Atlanta. We'll find out tomorrow.
And number 6, consider running more cards like Into the Floodmaw in your blue deck to fight these green decks. It's a super, super good card at just bouncing the land away and time walking a cub.
Absolutely. Now, don't forget to like, subscribe, and vibe with the Rebellion as we embark on Season 4 of State of the Meta. Make sure to stay tuned next week as we dive deep into Spotlight Atlanta and look to RC Portland with some thoughts on Lorwyn.
Until next time, you know what to do, Rebels. Untap, upkeep, resist.
So I got some of the Rebellion merch in, and I'm very happy about most of it. But I gotta say the sweatpants are very. I got the wrong size. Like I'm used to kind of baggy sweatpants, and instead these are like real type and just framing my fucking dick way too hard. And I talked to Katie about it. I was like, "Can I wear these in public?" She goes, "No."
I feel about so many of these Lorwyn cards, man. I swear they did not actually bring us back to... They didn't update Lorwyn. They just brought us back to old Lorwyn. These fucking cards that are like, yeah, we want you to spend 2 mana on turn 2 for a 1/2, and then 3 mana on turn 3, and then it'll turn into a 3/4 and stun something. And I'm like, bro, who's playing this shit? Like...
Taco Bell does not affect me.
What the fuck?
Other fast food places affect me, but like Taco Bell does not.
How? Every time I've had Taco Bell, I have woken up to take an emergency shit, pissed drunk like 3 hours later.
Are you lactose intolerant?
No, not even a little bit.
Hi there, darling. What's up?
Hey, so they don't have cherry Coke in cans or cherry Pepsi in cans.
Oh, this is bullshit.